Dungeon Meshi cured my brain rot. As a person who's practically drowning in isekai and fantasy brain rot, I have seen my fair share of trash brain rot series, especially the ones that keep overusing the Konosuba world layout. Whatever it is, you name it, I probably have seen it, or at least heard of it. After watching Frieren, I was like, that's it. I have used all my luck. For the next 10 years, I'll never find a good fantasy anime ever again. That is, until I saw it. Delicious and Dungeon. Yeah, that's the cringy name that no one really uses. So we just call it Dungeon Meshi. I already had a slight background on this series due to the hype that it was getting, but I was still a bit skeptical and thought it wasn't gonna be that special. And even if it was not gonna be even half as good as people make it out to be. And oh boy, I couldn't have been more wrong. Starring this series, you'd think it's a simple cooking show. Basically, Food Wars without the orgasm and fan service. A show where adventurers explore dungeons, find treasures, eat food, dungeon food. As in eating the monsters in the dungeon? Well, I guess they had their circumstances for that one. Let me take you back a little to how this all started. It all started in a small village when the ground suddenly shook and split apart. From the depth emerged a man who declared himself the ruler of the legendary Golden Country that had vanished 1,000 years ago. He spoke of a once thriving land, now buried deep underground due to the spell cast by a mad mage. The man proclaimed, "Whoever defeats the mage shall inherit my kingdom." With those words, he turned to dust and was carried away by the wind. From that very spot where the earth split open, the dungeon we know today was born. Skip forward to our main characters. Laios' party was adventuring, going deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly they made contact with a red dragon, and that did not end so well for them. The dragon pretty much wiped them clean, and Laios was going to be eaten, but his sister Fallen saved him, which led to her getting eaten instead. She proceeded to use a magic spell in order to teleport her brother and companions to safety, and thus starts our story. They wake up hungry, broke, and with a goal to save Fallen. You may wonder, how are they gonna save her? Isn't she like dead? I mean, she did get eaten, right? Well, here's what's interesting about this dungeon. The souls of the dead don't necessarily pass through. So as long as the body or skeleton is completely fine and not damaged to the point of no return, resurrection is very possible, but still risky. So they must hurry to save Fallen before she gets digested by the dragon and become dragon feces, basically dragon poop. In order to save Fallen, they can't afford to waste time, nor afford to buy any sort of food or supplies, as they are fucking broke as stated earlier. Laios is a huge monster nerd, so he suggested to eat in the dungeon, as the dungeon is a habitable place for monsters. There must be plants, water, light, basically anything that is necessary for life. And food. There's a whole ecosystem behind it. Carnivores monsters eat the monsters that are herbivores. Herbivores eat plants. Plants live on the need of water, light, and dirt to grow. Thus, they should technically be able to sustain themselves in the dungeon. To sell you on this show, well, think of Dungeon Meshi as basically a D&D RPG. Characters form a party, and they interact with the dungeon's inhabitants. They solve problems, engage in battles, explore, gather treasure and knowledge, eat monsters. Well, perhaps that's just Dungeon Meshi and not all D&D RPGs. But hey, that slime looking kinda tasty, you know what I mean? So I don't even blame them. Laios, the party leader, is quite autistic really. He's very awkward, may even appear to be weird to some. He cannot really read the room, he's pretty socially awkward. He's also a guy who's willing to eat anything. Yeah, anything. A gluttony, a devourer, the all might of eating random shit. And a very entertaining character who gives absolutely zero fucks. If he must eat a monster to survive, he will eat a monster to survive. If he must use black magic, he will use black magic. He's not someone who's going to give up on his goals just because something is morally wrong or forbidden. He's above such things. He's autistic. He also belongs to the race known as Tall Man. I guess that's humans in the world of Dungeon Meshi. There are other races as well, such as half-foot, dwarves, elves, etc. Our main party consists of a tall man, Laios, elf, Marcel, half-foot, Chilchak, and apparently he's also middle-aged, so he's pretty old. Yeah, he still looks like someone who just started elementary school. As well as the greatest cook, the absolute giga chat of chefs. Not even Gordon Ramsay holds a candle to him. It's Senshi, a dwarf. He has studied dungeon food or dungeon monsters for over 10 years, so he's pretty experienced when it comes to that. When they entered the dungeon with pretty much nothing but goodwill and hope that they don't fucking starve and die, they met Senshi, who taught them how to cook the mushroom monster they just caught. He decided to tag along in their journey. Thus begins the adventure to try to save Fallen without starving to death while they're at it. You see, in a video game or any dungeon really, if you see a slime or a monster, the first thing you'll think about is how to kill it, what items it may drop, how rare it is. You know what Elias is thinking about? How does it taste? Yeah, he's built different, not in a good way. This show is pretty much teaching you all about nature and food while being very detailed, not in a boring way, but in a fun manner that isn't something that will bore the viewer out, rather excite them. They use very unique concepts to explore the biological aspects of the monsters. The dungeon feels really alive. It's not just rooms upon rooms filled with traps and monsters. It's more like an underground world with its own ecosystems. The monsters aren't just there for fighting. They have their own habits and territories. It's like they actually live there and not just exist to fight adventurers. Plus, the dungeon itself keeps changing over and over, always keeping the adventurers in a confused state. 1 minute they're in a familiar area, and the next it's like the dungeon has totally rearranged itself. It feels like the dungeon has a personality of its own, almost like it's alive and reacting to the people inside it. Inside it. They encounter all sorts of different monsters and end up cooking some of the most delicious, mouth-watering food you'll ever see in an anime. Like, hell yeah, I want to try me some slime noodles. Though Marcel may be a bit skeptical about trying such food. If that was me, I'd just be digging straight in. I mean, since she's just a genius, he could cook horse poop and probably make it look good enough and appetizing to eat. This show has some of the funniest shit ever. Like, Laios is just so interested in eating monsters that he's trying so hard to find a way to make a living armor edible. Of course, that is just impossible. After all, metal is not edible. He shall not eat this monster this time. Or at least, that's what we thought. Laios notices something strange. There's like an egg or a cocoon that is being protected by the living armor. Why would the living armor protect an egg or a cocoon? A living being, basically. And then again, why does it move so fluidly? How is the armor capable of knowing where I am every time, despite having no eyes or ears? After that, Laios realizes that this is a living being. After trying to crack the in-betweens of the armor, he notices a white clam-looking like entity that is composed of many others, making the armor move around, hence making it edible. So yeah, they end up eating it. And that's, folks, how you cook a living armor. Dungeon Meshi. In one episode, they meet this group of adventurers. They look like fresh newbies who just got wiped out and are just laying there dead. Our main party was curious as to how they were wiped out. Turns out these bozos got wiped out by fucking treasure bugs. I don't know what the fuck that is, but it sounds cool. They're basically bugs that look like treasures, basically fooling people at first, then attacking right away when they are on low card. And guess what? They are edible! Let's go! We eating jewel burger today! Woo! Dungeon Meshi. This series is very creative with its monsters, and the world building is just incredible. Literally the topping on the cake. Though our main characters eat pretty much every monster they kill, there are limits to it, as Chilchuk and especially Marcel refuse to eat any humanoid creature, basically any creature that resembles a human, making Laios a bit sad about it. I guess no eating mermaids then. You'd wonder what kind of a pot and knife Senshi uses to cook up these monsters. I mean, some of them must have very tough skin and scales. Well, it just happened that his pot is made out of adamant and the knife made out of mithril. Basically, very rare materials that should be used for armors or swords that have the capability to even pierce a dragon's skin. But no, make a cooking pot out of it. Giga chat behavior from Senshi. As I continued watching this series and finally had my first look on the Mad Mage, I did not expect this level of glazing. He's just a dick rider. I mean, just hear it for yourself.
Kingdom. Everything that you can see. Buildings, currency, livestock, citizens, blood, and meat. Even each and every tiny grain of sand that you crush beneath your feet. All of it is the personal property of His Majesty, King Dalgal.
Reminds me of how the shinobi in Naruto used to glaze Kakashi. It's the copy ninja from the village hidden in the leaf. Kakashi the Sharingan. The copy ninja Kakashi Hatake. Yeah, insane glazing like that. Like, at this point, just take it out of your mouth. While this show may seem just like a funny, wholesome series, it's also very deep. I mean, in this one scene, Chilchuk wanted to escape. He was willing to lie to his party in order to make them leave the dungeon with him. But it's not as simple as you think, as it was not just some feelings of selfishness, but rather it was genuine worry and love for his friends, not wanting them to die. Though this series has its funny moments, and it has a ton of them, it still is serious at certain points. After all, this is life or death. They're not playing around, and their enemy is a dragon. Remember that newbie party that got wiped out? Well, yeah, they got revived by another mage party. We then get to meet the character, Kaburo, the leader of the newbie party. He's smart, ambitious, interesting, charismatic, someone with very focused ideals on his goals, has a sad backstory. Perhaps if this was a different story, he may just have been the protagonist. But I guess we'll just have to settle to our monster-eating autistic fellow. While there are a ton of funny moments that surround the cooking, it's not always about that. Due to being a half-foot, Senshi sometimes treats Chilchuk as a child even though he's a middle-aged man. Or this one time when Marcella got petrified. So what we do, we use her as a pot in order to ferment some type of food. Oh, Dungeon Meshi. Lyle's unawareness really harms him. I mean, he thought this one character was his friend, but turns out they just really disliked him and wanted him to basically leave them the fuck alone. Of course, he did not know that. Ah, our lovely main character. I mean, he's a guy who'd literally see a chimera and be like, ooh, that looks so cool. The type of person to see a beastman and be like, let me count her nipples. The type of guy to tell someone to face their fears. And if it turns out to be right, then sucks to suck, I guess. That's Laios. And your new favorite main character, Dungeon Meshi. It's not just a show with this big interesting hook that may catch you from the first episode, wanting more. It has some battles, but it's not necessarily a shonen. It ain't no Jujutsu Kaisen. It's very funny, but still has a deep plot to it. It's not an edgy story, really. It's kind of a deconstruction of typical generic anime tropes. Basically a fantasy anime if it was actually good, which isn't usually the case. Dungeon Meshi. Eat or be eaten. There is no hierarchy. Eating is a privilege for those who live. Dungeon Meshi. Oh, Dungeon Meshi. Subscribe.